The night my wife called me a useless old man was the same night the power went out, the bank accounts froze, and they realized something terrifying. Everything keeping them alive was in my name. I am Harold Bennett, 67 years old, and for the past 3 years, I have lived in my own house like a piece of furniture no one remembers buying. Not hated, not even argued with, most of the time. Just ignored. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about becoming invisible. It's not a single moment. It's a slow fading. A chair moved slightly out of the center of the room. A voice that stops being answered. A presence that becomes optional. My mornings were always the same. I woke up before sunrise, out of habit more than necessity. Old routines don't die, even when the world decides you're no longer needed. I'd make coffee in the same dented steel pot I'd used for 20 years, the one Linda once complained looked embarrassing when guests came over. We don't have guests anymore. I'd sit at the kitchen table, the wood worn smooth under my hands, and listen. Not to music, not to the news, just the house. The low hum of the refrigerator. The faint tick in the walls where the pipes expanded with the morning heat. Subtle things. Things most people don't notice unless they stop working. That's how I understood the world. Systems. Quiet, reliable systems. And I used to be one of them. Around 8, the house would come alive. Footsteps upstairs. The shower running. Closet doors sliding open and shut. Life starting without me. Ethan would come down first, already dressed in clothes that looked expensive but felt disposable. Always in a hurry, always checking his phone like it might stop beating if he didn't look at it every 5 seconds. Morning, I'd say. Sometimes he'd nod. Sometimes he wouldn't. That day he didn't. He grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, didn't look at me, didn't ask if I needed anything. Just scrolled, sighed, and muttered something about a meeting. Claire followed him, heels clicking against the tile, sharp and precise like everything else about her. She gave me a tight smile, the kind people give strangers in elevators. Morning, Harold. Not Dad. Not even Mr. Bennett. Just Harold. Clean. Distant. Linda came last. She used to linger in the kitchen, used to sit across from me, talk about bills, neighbors, small things that made up a life. Now she moved through the space like she was passing through a hotel lobby, temporary, detached. You left the light on in the garage again, she said, pouring herself coffee. I hadn't, but I didn't argue. Sorry, I replied. That was usually the extent of it. Correction without conversation. Presence without acknowledgement. They talked over me while they ate. About investments. About people I didn't know. About plans that never included me. Words like equity, scaling, networking floated through the air like a language I wasn't expected to understand. Once, Ethan laughed and said, Dad wouldn't get it. Different era. He said it lightly, like a joke. No one corrected him. I didn't either. After they left, the house fell quiet again. Not peaceful, just empty in a way that felt deliberate, like silence had weight. I stood there for a moment, looking at the kitchen they thought they owned, the counters they leaned on, the appliances they used without thinking, the walls that held everything together. Then I moved. Not dramatically, not angrily, just purposefully. I walked down the hallway to the small utility room most people never notice. It's tucked behind a plain white door, the kind your eyes slide past because there's nothing interesting about it. Inside, everything was exactly where I left it. The main electrical panel, the backup systems, the meters, labels in my handwriting, neat and precise. Years of maintenance, years of quiet control. I rested my hand on the panel, feeling the faint vibration running through it. The pulse of the house. Steady, reliable, unnoticed. They thought this place ran on autopilot. That things just worked because that's how the world is supposed to be. Flip a switch, light. Turn a handle, water. Swipe a card, access. They never asked how. Never cared who made sure it stayed that way. I did. Always had. And I never corrected them. Not when Ethan said he was carrying the family now. Not when Linda told her friends I was retired and mostly at home. Not when Claire referred to the house as ours in that casual, confident way. I let them believe it. Because explaining systems to people who don't respect them is pointless. I checked the readings. Everything normal. Stable. Of course it was. I made sure of that every single day. Before I left the room, I paused. Just for a second. Not thinking about revenge. Not even thinking about confrontation. Just observing. The quiet hum. The steady current. The invisible structure holding everything together. Then I turned off the light and closed the door. Out in the kitchen, the coffee had gone cold. I poured it out, rinsed the cup, and placed it back in the cabinet exactly where it belonged. Everything in its place. Everything working. Everything, depending on something they couldn't see. And the strange part? I wasn't angry. Not yet. But something had shifted. Because for the first time in a long while, I realized something simple. They didn't ignore me because I was useless. They ignored me because I made everything look effortless. And people never respect what never fails. By the time the sun dipped lower that afternoon, the house had already forgotten I existed again. That's how it worked. They came in loud and left louder. The front door slammed open just past 6. Ethan's voice filled the hallway before I even saw him. I'm telling you, it's just about positioning. You have to know how to present yourself. Claire laughed, that sharp, approving laugh she used when Ethan said something she thought sounded impressive. You've gotten so good at that, she said. Honestly, it's like watching a different person. I was in the living room, fixing the loose hinge on the cabinet beneath the television. It had been sagging for weeks. Not broken enough for them to notice, just off enough to bother me. They walked past me like I was part of the wall. Not a glance. Not a pause. Ethan tossed his keys onto the counter. Claire dropped her bag onto the chair I had repaired last winter after one of its legs cracked clean through. No one remembered that either. Linda came in a few minutes later, carrying grocery bags. She set them down with a sigh. Long day, she muttered. I stood up, wiped my hands on a rag, and walked over. Want help with that? I asked. She didn't even look at me. I've got it. It wasn't harsh. It was worse than that. It was automatic. I stood there for a second longer than I should have, then stepped back. The moment closed like it never existed. They gathered around the kitchen island, talking over each other. Claire pulled out her phone to show something. Photos, maybe. Ethan leaned in, nodding, already half distracted. Linda opened the fridge, frowning. Why is it so cold in here? She asked. Ethan shrugged. Isn't that what it's supposed to do? Claire laughed again. I didn't. Because I had adjusted the thermostat that morning. Slight calibration. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to keep the system efficient. Not that they'd notice. Maybe it's just old, Linda said. Like everything else in this house. Her words landed softly. Casual. But they stayed. Ethan smirked. We should really think about upgrading. Smarter systems. Automated stuff. Claire nodded immediately. Yeah, something modern. Something that doesn't need constant maintenance. Her eyes flicked toward me for half a second. That was all. Not even direct. Just implied. I felt it anyway. Ethan leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. Honestly, I don't get how you kept track of all this stuff for so long, Dad. Feels exhausting. I looked at him. It's not exhausting when you understand it, I said. He shrugged. Or maybe it's just outdated. Claire added, everything's automated now. You don't need someone manually checking things anymore. Linda poured herself a glass of water. Times change. There it was. 3 sentences. 3 people. Same message. You are no longer necessary. I nodded slowly, like I was considering their point. Maybe, I said. Ethan checked his phone again, already done with the conversation. Anyway, we've got bigger things to focus on. Of course they did. They always did. Dinner came and went like that. Noise. Movement. Conversations that circled around me, but never included me. I ate quietly, listening more than speaking. Not because I had nothing to say, but because no one was asking. At one point, Claire mentioned something about a dinner party they were planning. Just a few people from Ethan's network, she said. Investors, mostly. Linda smiled. That sounds lovely. Ethan added, yeah, it'll be good exposure. I took a sip of water. When is it? I asked. Claire hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. Next Friday, she said. No follow-up. No invitation. Just information. Like I was the landlord they had to notify. I see, I replied. Ethan didn't look up. We'll probably need the space set up differently. Maybe move some of the older furniture out of the way. Older furniture. I glanced at the chair beneath me. The one I built. Solid oak. Hand-finished. Still stronger than anything they'd ever buy online. But to them, it was just old. Do whatever you need, I said. And I meant it. Dinner ended. Plates left in the sink. Lights left on. Small things. Always small things. They drifted off to their own corners of the house. Bedroom, office, phone calls, screens. The usual retreat into their own worlds. I stayed behind. I always did. I cleaned the kitchen slowly. Not out of obligation. Out of habit. Water running. Dishes stacked. Surfaces wiped down. Order restored. When I finished, I stood there for a moment, looking at the reflection of the overhead light on the clean countertop. Everything looked fine. Perfect, even. That was the problem. I turned off the faucet, dried my hands, and walked back toward the hallway. As I passed the utility room door, I stopped. Just like that morning. I opened it. The hum greeted me again, steady, familiar, honest. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, shutting out the rest of the house. Inside here, nothing pretended. Every wire had a purpose. Every system a function. No illusions. No performance. Just reality. I checked the panel again. Reading steady. Load balanced. They had no idea how fragile that balance actually was. How many small adjustments it took to keep everything running smoothly. How quickly things could fall apart if someone stopped paying attention. I rested my hand against the metal surface, feeling the vibration. Then I thought about Ethan's words. Asterisk, you don't need someone manually checking things anymore. Asterisk. A small breath escaped me. Not a laugh. Not yet. But something close. Because people who trust systems they don't understand usually only learn one way. When those systems fail, I turned off the light and stepped back into the hallway. The house was quiet again. Peaceful on the surface. But underneath, everything was still moving. Still depending. Still connected. They just couldn't see it. And the more they ignored it, the easier it would be to prove they were wrong. The next few days unfolded exactly the way they always did. Smooth on the surface. Flawless, even. Ethan moved through life like a man who had already won. His phone never left his hand, always buzzing with messages, deals, opportunities. At least, that's what he called them. He spoke in confidence now, louder than before, like someone performing success instead of earning it. Claire mirrored him perfectly. Every word polished, every movement intentional. She had a way of turning ordinary moments into something that looked elevated. Even the way she set the table felt like it was meant to be seen, not used. Linda adapted to it all like she always did. She aligned herself with whatever felt stable, whatever looked like it was moving forward. Lately, that wasn't me. It was Ethan, and whatever world he believed he was stepping into. That evening, they were gathered in the living room, glasses in hand, talking about next Friday again, the dinner party. It had grown in importance. No longer just a gathering. Now it was strategic. 2 investors confirmed, Ethan said, pacing slightly as he spoke. And 1 potential partner. This could open doors. Claire nodded. We need everything to look right. Clean. Modern. Minimal. Linda glanced around the room. We should probably clear out some of the older pieces. It feels heavy. Her eyes drifted, briefly, toward the bookshelf, toward the cabinet, toward the things that had been there longer than any of them, toward the things I had built. I sat in the corner, quietly sanding down a small piece of wood. A drawer handle had cracked earlier that morning. Not broken enough to stop working, but not right either. You could just replace that, you know, Claire said, noticing what I was doing. I looked up. It still works, I replied. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That's not really the point. Ethan chimed in without looking at me. Yeah, Dad, sometimes it's better to upgrade than to fix. Upgrade. The word hung in the air. I ran my thumb along the grain of the wood, feeling the small imperfections smoothing out under pressure. Depends on what you're building, I said. Ethan shrugged. We're building something bigger. Claire added, something scalable. Linda nodded approvingly. Something that reflects who we are now. I didn't respond, because I already knew the truth. They weren't building anything. They were assembling an image. And images don't hold weight. They don't survive pressure. They just look good until they don't. Later that night, after they had all gone upstairs, I stepped outside onto the back porch. The air was cool, quiet, untouched by all the noise inside. I looked at the house from the outside. The lights were on in every room. Warm, inviting, alive. It looked like everything was working perfectly. And technically it was. I made sure of that. I walked along the side of the house to the small access panel near the foundation. Most people wouldn't even notice it. Just another metal box mounted low against the wall. I unlocked it. Inside, the backup system sat quietly. Power routing, water pressure controls, manual overrides. Things no one thinks about. Until they have to. I checked the connections. Tight, clean, stable. Of course they were. I installed most of this myself over the years. Upgraded it piece by piece. Not for comfort. Not for luxury. For reliability. For control. Because systems fail. And when they do, the difference between inconvenience and disaster is preparation. I closed the panel and locked it. Then I stood there for a moment longer, looking back at the glowing windows. Inside, they were probably still talking, still planning, still convinced everything around them existed because it simply should, because that's how their world worked. Things appeared, things functioned, things improved, without effort, without understanding, without cost. I went back inside quietly. As I passed through the living room, I noticed something new. A brochure on the table. Sleek design, clean typography, expensive printing, smart home integrated systems, it read. I picked it up, flipping through the pages. Automated lighting, remote access, AI-controlled energy distribution. Remove the need for manual oversight, one line said. I almost smiled. They were looking for a system to replace me. Not out of cruelty, out of assumption, because in their minds, I had already been replaced. They just hadn't updated the hardware yet. I set the brochure back down exactly where it was. Perfect alignment, perfect presentation, just like everything else in their world. Then I turned off the light and headed toward my room. As I passed the hallway, I glanced once more toward the utility door. Closed, quiet, unnoticed, exactly where it needed to be. And for the first time, a thought settled in my mind. Not heavy, not angry, just clear. They believed everything in their life was modern, independent, self-sustaining. But the truth was simpler than that. Everything they had, everything they trusted, everything they depended on, still ran through something old, something manual, something they had already dismissed. And the moment that connection broke, they wouldn't just lose convenience. They would lose control. And the dangerous part? They wouldn't even understand why. Friday came faster than expected. Not because time moved differently, but because the house had started changing. Subtly at first, then all at once. By mid-afternoon, the living room no longer looked like the place I had known for years. The heavy oak coffee table I built was pushed against the wall. The bookshelf, half empty now, had been rearranged to look cleaner, which really meant emptier. The chair I used every morning had been moved out entirely, replaced by something lighter, sleeker, less real. Claire stood in the center of the room, arms crossed, scanning everything like a director reviewing a set. Better, she said. This feels more open. Ethan nodded, adjusting the position of a decorative lamp that probably cost more than every tool in my garage combined. It looks professional, he added. That's what matters. Linda walked in behind them, holding a tray of glasses. It looks like a completely different house. I stood near the hallway, watching. She was right. It did, but not in the way they thought. They hadn't improved the house. They had stripped it of weight, of history, of anything that didn't fit the image they were trying to sell. Where do you want this? I asked, gesturing toward a box of removed items sitting near the wall. Claire glanced over briefly. Oh, just put it in storage or something. Storage. Like it no longer belonged. Like it never did. I picked up the box. It wasn't heavy, but it felt heavier than it should have. Inside were things that had lasted decades. Things that didn't break. Things that didn't need replacing. Things that didn't impress anyone anymore. As I carried it down the hallway, I heard Ethan's voice rise slightly behind me. Remember, tonight is important, he said. These aren't just guests. Claire responded quickly. I know. We need to make the right impression. Linda added, no clutter. No distractions. There was a pause. Then Ethan said it. Let's just keep things simple. I didn't need him to finish the sentence. I already understood what simple meant. I placed the box in the storage room and stood there for a moment, looking at the stacked pieces of a life that no longer fit into theirs. Then I closed the door. When I returned to the kitchen, the transformation continued. Counters cleared. Lights adjusted. Music playing softly in the background. Something neutral, something forgettable. Everything designed to be seen. Nothing designed to last. Harold, Claire said suddenly, her tone careful, measured. We might need you to stay out of the main area tonight. I looked at her. She didn't meet my eyes. Just while the guests are here, she added quickly. It's a professional setting. Ethan stepped in before I could respond. Yeah, Dad, it's just about optics. You know how it is. I did. Better than they thought. Linda didn't say anything. She just adjusted the placement of the glasses again. I understand, I said. And I meant it. Not in the way they hoped, but in the way that made everything clearer. I stepped back, giving them the space they wanted. The space they thought they needed. As evening settled in, the house filled with light. Not warm light. Strategic light. Bright where it needed to impress. Dim where it needed to hide. The doorbell rang at exactly 7. Then again. And again. Voices filled the house. New ones this time. Confident, polished, practiced. Laughter that came quickly and faded just as fast. Conversations layered on top of each other like background noise in a crowded room. I stayed in the hallway at first, then moved quietly toward the utility room. Not hiding, just observing. Through the walls, I could hear fragments of conversation. Great location. Impressive setup. Very clean design. Ethan's voice carried above the rest, smooth and controlled. We've built everything to be efficient. Streamlined. Self-sustaining. Self-sustaining. I leaned against the wall, listening. Claire added, we've minimized unnecessary dependencies. I closed my eyes for a second. Not out of frustration. Out of clarity. Because in that moment, everything aligned. Every word. Every assumption. Every quiet dismissal over the past months. They truly believed it. That everything around them functioned on its own. That systems didn't need oversight. That structure didn't need maintenance. That control didn't require understanding. I opened my eyes and looked at the panel in front of me. Steady, stable, reliable, just like always. Out in the living room, glasses clinked. Someone laughed louder than the rest. Ethan spoke again, confidence rising. We've eliminated most of the old infrastructure. It's all modern now. I almost smiled. Because that was the moment. Not dramatic. Not loud. But final. They weren't just ignoring what I did. They were erasing it. Replacing it with something they didn't understand. Something they trusted because it looked right. I reached out and rested my hand lightly against the panel. Felt the current. The quiet hum beneath everything. Then I pulled my hand away. No anger. No hesitation. Just a decision forming. Out in the living room, someone asked a question. Something about scalability. Something about reliability. Ethan answered without missing a beat. Everything here is under control. I looked at the system one more time, then turned off the light in the utility room. The hum continued, unchanged, for now. And as I stepped back into the hallway, one thought settled clearly in my mind. Not loud, not emotional, just precise. They didn't need to be convinced. They didn't need to be warned. They needed to experience it. Because people who mistake stability for simplicity only learn the difference one way. When it stops working. The laughter grew louder as the night went on. Not genuine laughter. The kind that fills space, not silence. From where I stood in the hallway, I could hear glasses being set down, voices overlapping, chairs shifting slightly across the floor I had leveled myself years ago. Every sound was familiar, not because of the people, but because of the structure holding them. Ethan was in control of the room now, or at least, that's what it sounded like. You see, the key is eliminating friction, he was saying. Everything here is designed to run efficiently, without constant oversight. A man's voice responded, curious, impressed. So everything is automated? Exactly, Ethan said. We've removed the need for manual dependency. I leaned slightly against the wall, just enough to hear more clearly. Manual dependency. That's what I had become. A thing to be removed. Replaced. Optimized out. Claire stepped in smoothly, her voice softer but just as calculated. We've invested in systems that anticipate needs. Energy, water, security, it's all integrated. Integrated. I glanced at the panel in front of me. There was nothing integrated about it. Every line had been run by hand. Every adjustment made deliberately. Every backup installed because I knew one day something would fail. Not if. When. Impressive, another guest said. That kind of setup isn't cheap. Ethan chuckled lightly. It's an investment, but it pays for itself when everything runs this smoothly. I closed my eyes for a moment. Not because I was angry, but because I could see it clearly now. They weren't just wrong. They were confident. Confident in something they didn't understand. Confident in a system they didn't build. Confident in stability they didn't maintain. That kind of confidence. It doesn't bend. It breaks. I opened my eyes again and stepped closer to the panel. My hand hovered over the switches. Not touching. Just there. Behind me, the conversation shifted. Reliability is everything, one of the investors said. You can't scale something if it's fragile. Ethan responded immediately. Exactly. That's why we've eliminated weak points. Weak points. I looked at the system again. Every connection, every circuit, every dependency. They thought the weak point was the visible part. The old, the manual, the human. They never considered the possibility. that the real weakness was ignorance. I rested my fingers lightly against the metal. Still steady. Still balanced. Still doing exactly what it was supposed to do. Because I made sure of it. Not them. Never them. A burst of laughter echoed from the living room. Someone raised a glass. To the future, a voice said. To efficiency, another added. To growth. The words stacked on top of each other. Light. Confident. Temporary. I let my hand fall back to my side. Not yet. Not here. Not like this. Because this wasn't about proving them wrong. Not immediately. It was about letting them believe they were right, just long enough. Long enough for the lesson to land. I stepped away from the panel and moved quietly down the hallway, stopping just before the corner where I could see into the living room without being seen. The space looked different now. Cleaner. Brighter. Stripped down to something that resembled success. People stood in small groups, drinks in hand, nodding, smiling, evaluating. Claire moved between them effortlessly, adjusting the flow of conversation. Linda hovered near the kitchen, refilling glasses, eager to belong to whatever this was. And Ethan? He stood at the center. Confident. Certain. Untouchable. He gestured toward the room as he spoke, as if he owned not just the space, but everything inside it. This place runs itself, he said. There it was again. I watched the faces around him. They believed him. Not because they understood, but because it looked true. That's all it takes. Presentation. Confidence. No one asks about the foundation when the walls are still standing. I stepped back into the hallway, out of sight again. The noise faded slightly. Just enough. I walked slowly toward the front door, listening as I moved. Every step. Every sound. Every system working in quiet harmony. Lights glowing. Water flowing. Power steady. All of it connected. All of it dependent. Not on technology. Not on automation. On attention. On maintenance. On someone who understood how easily it could all come apart. I reached the door and rested my hand on the handle. Not to leave. Just to pause. Behind me, Ethan's voice rose again. You don't need to worry about anything here, he said. It's all under control. I looked down at my hand. Then back toward the hallway. Toward the utility room. Toward the system they had already dismissed. A small breath escaped me. Quiet. Measured. Because for the first time, I wasn't just observing anymore. I was deciding. Not out of anger. Not out of revenge. But out of necessity. Because a system that is never tested eventually fails at the worst possible moment. And people who believe they are in control, without ever understanding what control actually means, need to learn the difference. I let go of the door handle, turned, and walked back down the hallway, slowly, deliberately, toward the one place in the house where everything still told the truth. The noise behind me continued, unchanged, unaware, still celebrating a future they thought they had already secured. But the balance had shifted, slightly, almost imperceptibly, and the most dangerous changes are the ones no one notices, until it's too late. The first sign was so small no one noticed it. Not even me, at first. A flicker, just a slight dip in the overhead lights as someone in the living room laughed a little too loudly. The kind of fluctuation most people ignore. The kind they blame on old wiring, or weather, or nothing at all. Conversation didn't stop. Why would it? To them, everything was still perfect. I was standing in the utility room again, the door half closed, the noise from the party muffled just enough to think clearly. The panel in front of me was steady, almost. A minor imbalance had crept in. Nothing dangerous, nothing urgent, just pressure building where it hadn't before. I didn't touch anything. Not yet. Out in the living room, Ethan's voice carried again. So what we've done here is remove uncertainty, he said. Everything is predictable. Another flicker. This time, a guest noticed. Did the lights just? Claire jumped in immediately, smooth as ever. Oh, it's nothing. Happens sometimes with the grid. The grid. I looked at the panel again. It wasn't the grid. It was internal. A shift in load distribution. Too many systems pulling at once. Lighting, heating, kitchen appliances, everything running at peak because they wanted the house to feel alive, impressive, full. They had turned everything on, without understanding what that meant. I could have corrected it in seconds. A simple adjustment. A redistribution. They'd never even know. But I didn't move. Because this wasn't failure. Not yet. This was strain. And strain tells you more about a system than perfection ever will. Another voice from the living room, slightly less confident now. You said this place was fully optimized, right? Ethan laughed lightly. It is. Probably just a temporary fluctuation. Temporary. I leaned closer to the panel, watching the readings shift again. Still within limits. Still stable. Barely. From the kitchen, I heard the refrigerator cycle louder than usual. The sound was subtle, but to me, it was as clear as a warning bell. Too much demand. Too little awareness. I stepped back, folding my arms. Listening. The party continued, but something had changed. The rhythm was off. People noticed things when they weren't perfect anymore. Is it getting warm in here? Someone asked. Claire responded quickly. There are a lot of people. That's normal. Not entirely wrong, but not entirely right either. The system was compensating now, pushing harder to maintain balance. And the harder it pushed, the closer it moved to its limits. I walked out of the utility room and into the hallway, just close enough to see again. Ethan was still smiling, still performing, but there was a tightness now, a slight edge creeping into his voice. Uncertainty. He could feel something. Not the cause, just the effect. A man near the window adjusted his collar. It's a bit stuffy. Claire moved toward the thermostat panel on the wall, sleek, digital, expensive. She tapped it. Nothing changed. She tapped again, a little harder this time. Still nothing. It's probably lagging, she said quickly. Lagging. I almost shook my head. Systems don't lag. They respond. Or they fail. There's no in-between. Another flicker. Longer this time. The music cut out for half a second before resuming. That got everyone's attention. Conversation slowed. I shifted. Ethan raised his hand slightly, like he was controlling the situation. It's fine, he said. Just a minor glitch. Glitch. The word hung there. Convenient. Dismissive. Wrong. Because this wasn't a glitch. This was cause and effect. This was what happens when demand exceeds understanding. I stepped back into the hallway again, out of sight. My breathing was steady. My hand still. No panic. Because I knew exactly what was happening. And more importantly, I knew exactly how to stop it. I just didn't. Not yet. Inside the living room, voices lowered. Less confident now. Less certain. Is this going to be an issue? One of the investors asked. Ethan hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. But I heard it. That gap. That crack. No, he said. Everything's under control. There it was again. Control. Claimed. Not earned. I turned my head slightly, listening to the systems around me. The hum was different now. Strained. Still functioning. But no longer effortless. And that was the truth they had never seen. Things don't fail suddenly. They warn you. Quietly. Subtly. Until you ignore it one too many times. Then they stop. I walked slowly back toward the utility room, each step measured. Behind me, the party continued. Voices trying to recover, laughter forced, confidence rebuilding on something that was already starting to slip. I reached the door and paused. My hand hovered near the handle. Inside, everything I needed was waiting. One adjustment, one correction, and the illusion would hold. The night would continue. Ethan would impress his investors. Claire would smile. Linda would believe everything was fine. Or, I could do nothing, and let the system answer for itself. I stood there for a long moment. Listening, measuring, deciding. Because this wasn't just about lights or temperature or power. This was about truth. And truth doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself. Slowly. Then all at once. Behind me, the lights flickered again. Longer. Darker. And this time, no one laughed. The room didn't recover after that last flicker. Something had shifted. Not in the lights. Not in the temperature. In the people. You could hear it in the silence that followed. Too long. Too noticeable. Conversations didn't stop completely, but they lost their rhythm. Laughter came slower now. Thinner, like it had to push through doubt before it could exist. Ethan felt it. I could hear it in his voice. All right, he said, clapping his hands lightly, forcing energy back into the room. Let's not let a small technical hiccup ruin the night. Hiccup. He was still minimizing it. Still trying to control something he didn't understand. A man near the center, one of the investors, older, sharper tone, spoke up. Technical hiccups are exactly what ruins scale. The words landed harder than anything else that night. No one laughed this time. Claire stepped in quickly, her voice smooth but tighter now. Everything is stable. It's just a temporary overload. Too many systems running at once. That was the closest anyone had come to the truth. But even she didn't realize what it meant. Can it handle it? The same man asked. A simple question, but not a casual one. Ethan hesitated again. I didn't need to see him to know it. That half-second pause was louder than anything he'd said all evening. Of course, he replied. It's designed for this. Designed. I leaned against the hallway wall, listening. The system hummed behind me. Lower now, heavier. Not failing. Not yet. But no longer invisible. And once people notice something, they don't stop noticing. Another guest walked toward the thermostat again, tapping the screen with more urgency this time. It's not responding, she said. Claire moved quickly to her side. Let me try. Tap. Tap again. Nothing. The illusion was starting to crack. Ethan raised his voice slightly, trying to regain control of the narrative. It's probably just a sync delay. These systems are cloud-based. Cloud-based. He reached for complexity to hide simplicity, because he didn't know where the problem actually lived. I did. It wasn't in the cloud. It wasn't digital. It was physical. Load. Distribution. Limits. Things you don't fix with an app. A low, subtle click echoed through the walls. I felt it before I fully heard it. A shift. One of the internal relays compensating. Pushing harder. Buying time. In the living room, someone noticed. What was that? This time, no one answered immediately. Claire looked toward Ethan. Ethan looked unsure. Just for a second. Then he forced a smile. Probably just the system recalibrating. Recalibrating. The words sounded hollow now. Because the system wasn't recalibrating. It was enduring. And endurance has a limit. The temperature had risen noticeably. Not unbearable, but uncomfortable enough that people adjusted their sleeves, loosened collars, shifted their weight. Discomfort spreads faster than panic. And it's harder to ignore. Linda's voice finally cut in, softer but edged with concern. Harold might know what's going on. The room went quiet again. Not completely, but enough. Enough for that sentence to land exactly where it needed to. Ethan responded quickly, too quickly. He wouldn't understand this system, he said. It's not the same as what he used to work with. Used to. Claire nodded, backing him up. Yeah, this is all modern infrastructure. Modern. Advanced. Untouchable. Except it wasn't. Another flicker. This time longer. The music cut out completely. Didn't come back. The silence that followed wasn't subtle anymore. It was heavy. A glass was set down too hard somewhere in the room. Someone cleared their throat. The investor spoke again, voice calm but no longer impressed. You said this was reliable. Not a question. A statement. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Because now, he couldn't. I stepped away from the wall. Slowly. Not rushing. Not reacting. Just moving. Toward the utility room. Behind me, voices started rising. Not loud, but overlapping. Questions. Assumptions. Frustration trying to find a direction. Claire again, trying to hold things together. It's fine, we just need a minute. A minute. That's what people say when they don't know what else to say. I reached the door. Paused. Inside, the system was still holding. Barely. Every component doing its job. Pushing past comfort. Maintaining balance under pressure. But no system is infinite. And this one had already been pushed further than they realized. I placed my hand on the handle. Behind me, Ethan finally spoke again. We've got it under control. His voice cracked. Just slightly. But enough. Enough for everyone to hear it. And in that moment, the illusion didn't just weaken. It broke. Because control isn't something you say. It's something you demonstrate. And for the first time that night, he couldn't. I opened the utility room door slowly, stepped inside, and closed it behind me. The noise outside dulled instantly, replaced by something far more honest. The strained hum. The tight, controlled resistance of a system doing everything it could not to fail. I stood there in the dim light, looking at it, understanding it, feeling it, and knowing one simple truth. They weren't in denial anymore. They were in need. They just didn't know how to admit it yet. But they would. Very soon. Inside the utility room, the truth was impossible to ignore. The system wasn't just strained anymore. It was at its edge. The hum had changed. Lower, heavier, uneven in a way only someone who had lived with it for years could recognize. The panel in front of me showed it clearly. Load distribution skewed. Circuits compensating beyond their comfort range. Backup buffers already engaged. It had held longer than it should have. Because I had built it that way. Because I never trusted people to understand limits. Outside, the noise had shifted again. No more laughter. Now it was voices layered with tension, questions without answers. Why isn't anything responding? Is the system down? Do you have manual control? Manual control. I almost exhaled at that. Now they were asking the right questions. Just too late. I stepped closer to the panel, scanning each section carefully. Nothing had failed yet. Not a single breaker tripped. Not a single line fully overloaded. But everything was close. Too close. This wasn't collapse. This was the moment right before it. The moment where one more demand, one more assumption, one more ignored signal, and everything would drop. Clean. Silent. Total. I reached out and rested my hand on the metal surface again. Warm. Warmer than it should be. Behind me, footsteps approached. Fast. Uncertain. The door opened before I turned around. Har. Ethan stopped mid-sentence. It was the first time all night he had come looking for me. Not passed by me. Not spoken around me. Come to me. He stood in the doorway, the bright light from the hallway cutting into the dim space behind me. His expression was different now. No performance. No confidence. Just confusion. What's going on? He asked. Not a command. Not an explanation. A question. A real one. I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence sit between us. Let him feel it. Because for the first time, he was actually listening. The system's under stress, I said finally, calm and even. Too much demand. Not enough balance. He blinked. That doesn't make sense. It's designed to handle. It's designed. I cut in quietly, based on assumptions. He frowned, stepping further into the room. What assumptions? That someone's paying attention. The words landed harder than anything I could have said louder. Behind him, Claire appeared, stopping just outside the door. Can you fix it? She asked quickly. Straight to the point. No pretense now. No distance. Just need. I looked at her. Then back at Ethan. I can stabilize it, I said. Ethan exhaled, tension breaking slightly. Okay, good. Then just. I didn't move. And that's when he noticed. Dad, he said, slower now. What are you waiting for? I held his gaze. For the first time in years, he didn't look away. Tell me, I said, how this system works. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Claire stepped in. This isn't the time for. It is exactly the time, I said, still calm. No anger. No raised voice. Just truth. You've been explaining it all night, I continued, looking back at Ethan. Self-sustaining. Automated. No manual dependency. I gestured lightly toward the panel. So explain it. Silence. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that exposes something. Ethan's jaw tightened. I don't need to explain it to fix it. No, I said. You need to understand it. Another flicker hit the house. Stronger. The hallway light behind them dimmed noticeably before returning. Claire turned her head instinctively. This is getting worse. Yes, I replied. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, frustration rising. Dad, this isn't a lesson, okay? People are out there. I know, I said. I've been listening. And I had. Every word. Every claim. Every dismissal. Another voice from the living room called out, louder now. Ethan, we've lost the music, and the AC's not responding. That did it. The pressure snapped something in him, not the system. Him. Fine, he said, turning back to me. I don't know how it works. Okay. I don't know the details. But you do. So just fix it. There it was. Not respect. Not yet. But honesty. Raw. Unfiltered. And necessary. I studied him for a moment. Then asked the only question that mattered. Do you think it runs without me? He hesitated. This time longer. Then, quietly. No. The word was small. But it changed everything. Because it was the first real answer he had given. Claire stepped forward again, urgency cutting through her voice. Please. Whatever this is, we can talk about it later. Just fix it now. I looked at her. Then at the panel. Then back at both of them. This was the moment. Not the collapse. The realization. The point where illusion ends. And understanding begins. I turned back to the system. Finally. Slowly. Deliberately. My hand moved to the controls. Not rushed. Not reactive. Precise. Because this was never about letting it fail completely. It was about letting them see how close it could come. I made the first adjustment. A small one. Barely visible. But immediate. The hum shifted. Stabilized slightly. Behind me, Ethan exhaled again. Relief. Too early. Because this wasn't over. Not yet. And as I prepared the next adjustment, one thought stayed clear in my mind. They didn't just need the system to work again. They needed to understand. Why it almost didn't. I didn't rush. That was the first thing Ethan noticed. He was standing just behind me, close enough to hear every small movement, every shift in the panel, every subtle change in the hum. but not close enough to understand any of it. Because understanding doesn't come from proximity. It comes from experience. My fingers moved across the switches with slow precision, adjusting load distribution one circuit at a time. Not fixing everything. Just relieving pressure. Enough to keep it standing. Not enough to hide the damage. Behind me, the house responded. The hum softened slightly. The tension eased, but only a little. In the living room, someone spoke up. Okay, I think it's cooling down. Another voice followed, cautious. Lights seemed stable again. Relief started to creep back in. Careful. Tentative. Dangerous. Because relief makes people forget too quickly. Ethan exhaled, louder this time. See? I told you it was under control. I stopped moving. Not turning around. Not reacting. Just stopping. The system held steady. Balanced, for now. But incomplete. Ethan noticed. Why'd you stop? He asked. I kept my eyes on the panel. Because it's stable, I said. He frowned. Then finish it. I turned slowly. Looked at him. No, I said. The word wasn't loud. But it cut clean. Claire stepped forward immediately. What do you mean, no? I gestured lightly toward the panel. It's not fixed, I explained. It's just not breaking yet. Ethan's frustration flared again. That's not good enough. People are still out there. Then go tell them the truth. The silence that followed was heavier than anything before. Tell them, I continued, that your system can't handle what you promised. He shook his head. I'm not doing that. Then don't, I said calmly. But don't pretend this is solved. Another voice echoed from the living room. Ethan, the thermostat still isn't responding. Claire turned toward the hallway instinctively, then back to me. Just finish it. Please. I studied her for a moment. The confidence was gone now, replaced by something else. Dependence. I will, I said, when you understand what you're asking for. Ethan stepped closer, tension rising again. This isn't the time for that. It's the only time, I replied. Because once things are working again, people stop listening. He ran his hands through his hair again, pacing once across the small room. What do you want me to say? He asked. I didn't answer immediately, because this wasn't about words. It was about awareness. You built tonight on something you don't understand, I said. You told them everything was reliable, scalable, self-sustaining. I tapped the panel lightly. This is what you were talking about. He looked at it. Really looked this time. Not as background. Not as a given. As a system. A real one. And it's not self-sustaining, he said quietly. No. It needs someone to manage it. Yes. To understand it. Yes. The answers came faster now. Because he wasn't arguing anymore. He was learning. Behind him, Claire spoke again, softer this time. So what happens if you don't fix it? I looked at her. Then it fails. Simple. Direct. No drama. That's what made it real. Ethan swallowed. How long? Minutes, I said. Maybe less if demand spikes again. As if on cue, another surge hit the system, subtle, but enough. The lights in the hallway dimmed again. This time longer. Claire turned sharply. Okay, that's enough. We don't have time for this. She looked at Ethan. Then back at me. Please. That word again. Different now. Not controlled. Not calculated. Real. I turned back to the panel. And this time, I moved. Faster. Not rushed. Just decisive. Switches adjusted. Load redistributed properly. Backup systems rebalanced. Each movement deliberate. Each correction earned. Behind me, the house responded again. The hum smoothed out. The tension disappeared. Not reduced. Gone. In the living room, the change was immediate. Air cooled. Lights steadied. Music flickered back on. Voices lifted. Relieved. Grateful. Unaware of how close they had come. I finished the last adjustment and stepped back. Silence in the utility room again. But different now. Not strained. Stable. Ethan exhaled slowly. Okay. Okay. That's better. Claire leaned against the doorframe slightly, her shoulders dropping. Thank you, she said. I nodded once. Not accepting. Not dismissing. Just acknowledging. Ethan looked at the panel again. Then at me. Then back at the panel. What do we tell them? He asked. That question mattered. More than anything else tonight. I walked past him toward the door, paused beside him, and said quietly, You can tell them whatever you want. I opened the door. The noise of the party rushed back in. Normal. Comfortable. Safe. For now, I added. Then I stepped out into the hallway, leaving him there, standing in front of something he had finally seen, but still didn't fully understand. And that was the problem, because fixing something once doesn't mean you're in control of it. It just means someone else was. When I stepped back into the living room, nothing looked broken. That was the strange part. The lights were steady again. The air felt cooler. The music had resumed. Soft, neutral, forgettable, just like before. Conversations picked up where they had left off, though slightly more cautious now, like people walking across a surface they weren't entirely sure would hold. If you hadn't been paying attention, you'd think nothing had happened. Ethan re-entered the room a few seconds after me. Different this time. Subtly. Not something everyone would notice. But I did. He didn't walk straight to the center like before. Didn't raise his voice to reclaim the room. Didn't perform. He paused. Just for a moment. Scanning faces. Measuring the shift. The older investor, the one who had asked the hardest questions earlier, was watching him closely. Not impressed anymore. Not convinced. Waiting. That's what people do when they sense weakness. They wait to see if it shows again. Ethan straightened his jacket slightly, took a breath, and stepped forward. Apologies for that, he said, voice controlled but lower now. We had a minor load imbalance. It's been resolved. Load imbalance. Better. Closer to the truth. But still not quite there. The investor tilted his head. And what caused it? Ethan hesitated. I saw it again. That gap. Smaller this time. But still there. Temporary demand spike, he said. Nothing structural. The man didn't respond immediately. Just nodded once. Not agreement. Acknowledgement. Then he took a sip of his drink and looked away. Conversation resumed again, but it didn't carry the same weight. The energy had shifted permanently. Not collapsed, but downgraded. Claire moved quickly to fill the space, redirecting conversations, smiling, re-engaging smaller groups. She was good at that. Better than Ethan. But even she couldn't fully restore what had been lost. Because confidence, once cracked, doesn't come back the same. I moved quietly toward the edge of the room, near the window. Not hiding, not engaging, just observing. Linda approached me after a few minutes, her expression different from before. Not cold, not dismissive, uncertain. You fixed it, she said. I looked at her. I stabilized it, I replied. She frowned slightly. What's the difference? I held her gaze for a moment. Stability depends on conditions, I said. Control depends on understanding. She didn't respond. Because she didn't understand the difference. Not yet. Across the room, Ethan was speaking again, quieter now, more measured. He wasn't making big claims anymore. No sweeping statements. No guarantees. Just answers. Shorter. Safer. The investor asked another question. Do you have redundancy built into the system? Ethan nodded. Yes. Another pause. Then the follow-up. Do you personally manage it? That one landed. Ethan glanced, just for a second, toward the hallway. Toward the direction of the utility room. Toward me. Then back at the investor. Not directly, he said. Honest. Finally. The investor nodded again. This time, slightly approving. Because honesty carries more weight than confidence. Even if it comes late. The night continued. But it never recovered. Not fully. People stayed, but shorter than expected. Conversations wrapped up earlier. Handshakes came sooner. By 10, the room had started to empty. One by one. Then in pairs. Until only the core remained. Ethan, Claire, Linda, and me. The house was quiet again. But not the same quiet as before. This one had memory. Claire was the first to speak. Well, she said, exhaling. That could have gone better. Ethan didn't respond. He was standing near the center of the room, looking around like he was seeing it differently now. Not as a stage. As a structure. Linda crossed her arms. What happened? He didn't answer right away. Because now, he didn't want to guess. He turned toward me instead. Not fully, but enough. What actually happened, he asked. I stepped away from the window and walked slowly into the room. No one was managing the load, I said. Too many systems running at once. No adjustment. No balance. Claire shook her head. But it's automated. No, I said. Calm. Clear. It's assisted. Silence. Ethan looked down briefly, then back up. And if you weren't here, he asked. I didn't answer immediately. I let the question sit. Because this one mattered. Then I said, you wouldn't have a house full of guests right now. The words weren't harsh. But they were final. Claire looked away. Linda sat down slowly in one of the chairs, the energy finally leaving her posture. Ethan didn't move. He just stood there, processing. For the first time that night, there was no performance left. No image. No illusion. Just reality. And it was quieter than anything that came before. After a long moment, he spoke again. Lower. Different. Why didn't you say anything earlier? I looked at him, then around the room, at everything they had rearranged, replaced, redefined. You weren't listening earlier, I said. No accusation, just fact. He nodded slightly, not in agreement, in recognition. And that was the moment things truly changed. Not when the system failed, not when the lights flickered, but now, when he finally understood. That control isn't something you claim in front of other people. It's something you prove when no one is watching. And tonight, he hadn't. No one moved for a while after that. The house was quiet again, but this time the silence wasn't empty. It was heavy, not uncomfortable in the usual way, not tense like before an argument. It was something else, something slower, something that forced people to think. Ethan was still standing where I left him, in the center of the room that no longer felt like his stage. His shoulders had dropped slightly, not in defeat, but in realization. The kind that doesn't hit all at once, but settles in piece by piece. Claire had stopped pacing. She leaned against the edge of the counter now, arms folded, not defensively, but like she was holding on to something internal, trying to reevaluate everything she had assumed. Linda sat quietly, looking around the room as if she was seeing it differently for the first time. Not as home, as something dependent. Ethan finally broke the silence. So this whole time, he started, then stopped. He didn't finish the sentence, because he didn't know how to frame it yet. I didn't help him. That part matters. People don't truly understand something if you finish the thought for them. They have to arrive at it themselves. He tried again. This whole time, it wasn't running on its own. It wasn't a question, just a statement he was testing out loud. No, I said. Another pause. Claire looked up at me. Then why didn't anything fail before tonight? That was the right question. The first real one she had asked. Because I didn't let it, I answered. Simple, direct, and that's what made it land. Ethan let out a slow breath, nodding once like something had just clicked into place. You were managing it, he said. Yes. All of it. I glanced toward the hallway. The parts that matter, I replied. Linda shifted in her seat. But you never said anything. I looked at her. I did, I said. Just not in the way you were expecting. She frowned. What does that mean? It means I kept things working, I answered. Every day? Quietly, without needing to explain it. Silence again. Because now, they were starting to understand something uncomfortable. Not just that I had control, but that they had been benefiting from it, without ever acknowledging it. Claire straightened slightly. But things shouldn't depend on one person like that. There it was. The instinct to reject the truth. Not because it's wrong. Because it's inconvenient. They don't have to, I said. Then why did this? Because no one replaced it. That stopped her. Ethan looked at me again, sharper now. We did replace it. The systems, the upgrades, the automation. No, I said. Still calm. Still steady. You replaced the interface. That one took a second. Claire blinked. What? You changed what you could see. I continued. Not what actually runs it. I gestured lightly around the room. Lights. Screens. Controls. All of that is surface level. Then I pointed down the hallway. The real system is behind a door you stopped noticing. Silence. Deeper this time. Because now they could see it. Not physically. Conceptually. Ethan sat down slowly in one of the chairs. One of the new ones, not the ones he had moved out earlier. So we've been relying on something we don't understand, he said. Yes. And we assumed it would just keep working. Yes. And it didn't, because no one was managing it. Yes. Each answer came easier now. Because he wasn't resisting anymore. He was mapping it. Understanding it. Claire looked down at the floor, then back up. So what happens now? That question mattered more than anything else tonight. Not what happened. What happens next? I didn't answer right away. Because this wasn't about the system anymore. It was about them. Now, I said slowly. You decide whether you want control or just the appearance of it. Ethan looked up. What's the difference? I held his gaze. Control means responsibility, I said. It means understanding the systems you depend on. It means paying attention before things break. I paused. Appearance means everything looks fine until it isn't. No one spoke, because they had just lived that difference. Claire's voice came quieter now. So if you hadn't stepped in, I let the sentence hang, then finished it. The house would have shut down. Linda inhaled sharply. Completely, she asked. Yes. No exaggeration. No drama. Just truth. Ethan leaned back slightly, staring at nothing in particular. That would have been, he started. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. We all knew what it would have been. A disaster. Not just for the house. For everything he had tried to build that night. After a long silence, he looked at me again. Different this time. No dismissal. No distance. Just clarity. Why did you let it get that far, he asked. That question was inevitable. And fair. I nodded once. Because you needed to see it, I said. He held my gaze. Didn't argue. Didn't push back. Because deep down, he knew it was true. And that's when something subtle but important happened. The room didn't just quiet down. It shifted. Not back to what it was before. Forward. Into something new. Not comfortable. Not easy. But real. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't invisible anymore. The house didn't go back to the way it was. Not the next morning. Not the next week. Because once you see how something really works, you can't unsee it. The first change was quiet. Ethan woke up earlier than usual. Not out of habit. Out of intention. I was already in the kitchen when he walked in. The same way I had been every morning for years. Coffee brewing. Table cleared. The house still and predictable. He stopped in the doorway for a second. Watching. That alone was different. Morning, I said. He nodded. But this time, he didn't walk past me. He pulled out a chair and sat down across from me. No phone in his hand. No rush in his movement. Just present. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he asked, "Can you show me?" Simple. Direct. Real. I looked at him. "Show you what?" I said, even though I already knew. How it actually works. Not fix it. Not handle it. Understand it. That was new. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Then nodded once. "Finish your coffee," I said. "Then we'll start." He didn't argue. Didn't rush me. Just sat there. Waiting. Learning how to wait. That mattered more than he realized. The utility room looked exactly the same as it always had. Plain. Unremarkable. Easy to ignore. Until you knew what it contained. Ethan stood beside me as I opened the panel. No commentary. No assumptions. Just watching. I walked him through it slowly. Not simplifying. Not dressing it up. Just truth. This controls your load distribution, I said, pointing to the main section. Everything you turn on, lights, heating, appliances, it all comes through here. He nodded, eyes following every movement. And this? He asked, pointing to a smaller section. Backup routing, I said. When something spikes, this compensates. And if it can't, it fails. No hesitation. No sugarcoating. He absorbed that. You could see it. Not reacting emotionally. Processing structurally. Claire appeared at the doorway halfway through. Quiet. Watching. She didn't interrupt. Didn't correct. Just listened. That was new too. Why didn't automation catch this? She asked eventually. I glanced at her. Because automation follows rules, I said. It doesn't understand context. She frowned slightly. What's the difference? Rules don't adapt, I replied. People do. Silence settled again. Not uncomfortable. Focused. Ethan stepped closer to the panel. Carefully this time. Not like before. Show me what you changed last night, he said. So I did. Step by step. Every adjustment. Every decision. Every reason behind it. No shortcuts. No assumptions. Because this wasn't about fixing a problem. It was about building awareness. Days passed. Then weeks. And the house changed. Not physically. Structurally. Ethan started checking things. Not obsessively. But intentionally. He asked questions. Real ones. Not to challenge. To understand. Claire adjusted too. Less focused on appearance. More aware of function. She still cared about presentation, but now she asked what it depended on. Linda. She noticed more. Small things. Things she used to overlook. A light left on. A sound out of place. A system behaving slightly differently. Not because she understood it completely, but because she had learned that everything had a reason. And me? I didn't take back control. That wasn't the point. I shared it. Carefully. Deliberately. Because control given too easily becomes invisible again. One evening, a few weeks later, Ethan stood in the utility room alone. I watched from the doorway. He didn't see me. He was adjusting the panel. Slowly. Carefully. Checking each reading before moving to the next. Not guessing. Thinking. He made a small correction. Then stepped back. Listened. Waited. The system responded. Smooth. Stable. Balanced. He exhaled quietly. Not in relief. In understanding. That was the difference. I stepped back before he turned around. Didn't need to say anything. Didn't need to be seen. Because this time, he knew. Later that night, we sat in the living room again. The same room. Different atmosphere. Not staged. Not stripped down. Just lived in. Ethan leaned back in his chair. The old one. The one he had moved out before. He hadn't said anything when he brought it back. He didn't need to. Claire sat beside him, flipping through something on her tablet, but slower now. Less distracted. Linda was in the kitchen, humming softly. Normal sounds. Real ones. After a while, Ethan spoke. Not loudly. Not for effect. Just enough. I was wrong, he said. I looked at him. He met my eyes. No hesitation. I thought control meant things just worked, he continued. Like, automatically. He shook his head slightly. It doesn't. No, I said. He nodded once. It means someone's paying attention. I didn't answer. Because he already had. A small silence followed. But this one was different from all the others. It wasn't filled with tension, or distance, or avoidance. It was settled. Then he added, almost to himself. I thought you were out of the system. I leaned back slightly, hands resting on the arm of the chair. I never left it, I said. He let out a quiet breath, then gave a small nod. Not dramatic, not emotional, just acknowledgement. And that was enough. Because in the end, nothing in the house had really changed. The systems were the same. The structure was the same. Even the sounds were the same. The only thing that changed was who understood them. And that changed everything. Because I was never useless. I was just the part of their life. They didn't notice. Until it almost stopped working.